This is the Moonlight Chronicles, a deep dive into the moments of glory and defeat with the players, the coaches, and the fans who experienced them. The date was January 31st, 1993. It was Super Bowl Sunday. And the biggest sporting event of the day prior to the Super Bowl was a college basketball game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Iowa Hawkeyes in Carver-Hawkeye Arena in Iowa City, Iowa. Jim Nantz, Billy Packer, and Pat O'Brien were on the call for CBS that day. And this was no ordinary Michigan basketball team. This was the Fab Five: Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, Jalen Rose, Ray Jackson, Jimmy King, even a future general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers, Rob Pelinka, was in the starting lineup that day, and they were playing against one of Dr. Tom Davis's best teams he had ever had, led by Val Barnes and A.C. Earl, and even a young Kenyon Murray was a freshman on this team. But what made this game extra special and memorable even 28 years later was this was the first home game the Hawkeyes had played since the passing of Chris Street, their best player, their leader. And so there was a different type of excitement and emotion and feeling in Carver-Hawkeye Arena that day. And so for this episode of the podcast, we're doing this as a Moonlight Chronicle because this was one of those games that many sports fans all across the country will remember, but especially here in the state of Iowa. If you were alive at that time, you were probably tuned in to the pregame ceremony where the University of Iowa retired Chris Street's number 40. You probably tuned into the halftime show that paid tribute to Chris Street. It was an emotional day, not only for Hawkeye fans, not only for Iowans, but basketball fans and sports fans all across the country. And so for this episode of the podcast, I sit down with Wade Lookingbill, who was in the starting lineup for the Hawkeyes that day. And we not only talk about this basketball game between the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Michigan Wolverines, and it was a great college basketball game and a real time capsule of early 90s basketball before the three-pointer really revolutionized the game. Not only do we talk about that game, but we also talk about the legacy of Chris Street, what Chris was like as a basketball player, and more importantly, what Chris was like as a friend and a teammate to guys like Wade Lookingbill. It's a little bit different than some of the episodes we've done here on the podcast, but as we come upon the anniversary of Chris Street's passing once again, I thought it'd be really important to do something like this with the podcast. So please let us know if you enjoyed this type of format, and if you like what we're doing here on the Moonlight Graham Show, make sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever it is that you get your podcast, and we would love it if you left us a 5-star review. You can also follow the show on social media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We love hearing from you guys each and every week. So enjoy today's episode of the Moonlight Graham Show, where I sit down with Wade Lookingbill and we talk about that great Iowa versus Michigan game back in early 1993 and the legacy of Chris Street. Wade Lookingbill, you're back in the Moonlight Graham Show studio. Welcome back.
Thanks, man. Good to be here. Things have changed a lot in your life. You kicked your roommate out, and
that's right. I kicked the
roommate
roommate out. Got
poor
a new
woman
roommate
to marry you, and had a child. And
I actually have
look at you,
two
grown
new
up
roommates. Yeah,
grown up. Yeah,
yeah, and life is good. Life
Adulting.
is good.
Yeah,
it's good to see you back here.
Thank you.
You know, the topic of our conversation tonight is something from 18 years ago. We're talking about the 1992-1993 basketball season. How often do you recall?
It's actually 28
or
years
28.
Ago. Yeah,
I'm a decade off.
St. Ed's math.
That is
man.
that St. Ed's math.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
You're
what
close.
happens when
You had
nuns
it.
teach you math.
You had it.
So 28 years ago, how
Yeah.
often do you think of a basketball season that's 28 years in the rearview mirror?
It's funny. It rarely comes up unless it's this. Season, this game, this stretch of time. We played Duke. Chris was killed in an accident. The Michigan State game, which we'll talk about on the road, and then that Fab Five Super Bowl Sunday, first home game back. So other than that, that's what I remember kind of in my career. I don't know if that's good or bad or right or wrong, but that's kind of what I'm linked to a little bit too. And but I just appreciate you talking about it and keeping Chris Street's memory alive. I think it's terrific.
Where this came from, and I think I texted you shortly afterwards, was the Iowa State basketball game this year was kind of a blowout. Iowa did to Iowa State what they expected to. I think Iowa State had a little run in the first half, showed some life, but then Iowa just put a whipping on Iowa State. And then right after that game, they're replaying the Iowa-Michigan game from 1993 as the first home game at Carver-Hawkeye after the death of Chris Street. And even though the game was a blowout and it was late on a Friday night, I could not turn it off because that game, not only was it the first game at Carver after Chris Street's death, but you also had the Fab Five from Michigan. You had the A-team with Jim Nance and Billy Packer and Pat O'Brien from CBS doing the game. And it was just a captivating game to watch.
Super Bowl Sunday.
It was on Super Bowl Sunday in 93, Cowboys, Bills, it's a dynasty. And it's just one of these things. I think people in Iowa, everybody maybe remembers that game because it was a primetime college basketball game. I'm sure your phone had to be blowing up after that Iowa
It was
State
really
game.
interesting. Say what you want about the Big Ten Network, and they they dictate whatever they pay their schools, $40 million, $50 million. If you want our money, you're going to do this, this, and this, and they are the golden goose. But they did a terrific thing by replaying that game, and they chopped it up so it was just an hour. There wasn't a lot of downtime, and the halftime obviously then was cut. But they've done a really good job. They showed the Michigan State game a few years back. It was terrific, and I had kind of forgotten it was going to be on, and had lost a little bit of interest in the Iowa State game because it was getting out of hand. But yeah, at 10:05, my phone starts blowing up, and my daughter and my son's phone, they're not watching the game; they could care less. But their friends are texting, and I think it's just something with Chris's death and the era that it was in. It's just whether it's the JFK moment or your 9/11 moment. If you're between the ages of 10 and 80, you remember that.
For sure. And it also, if you go back and rewatch that game, you really get a feeling that college basketball meant a lot more to like America and meant a lot more to maybe sports in America at that time. Like it was a primo event. This was not a time of like the one and done. This was a time where coaches like Bobby Knight and Judd Heathcote and Mike Krzyzewski, these guys were just huge deals in the sporting landscape. Dr. Tom, these guys were household names, and you had guys staying for 4 years at college or at colleges, and you just got used to these brands of basketball. It's not so much the case today. College basketball is still a big deal, but you really got a feel for like this was a golden era of college basketball when you rewatch it.
Yeah, you look at Michigan, and they were really talented, and Chris Webber was a sophomore that year. He was going to come out. In fact, the Chris Webber joke, we always used to say, why didn't Chris Webber leave Michigan after his freshman year to go to the NBA?
Why is that?
Because he couldn't afford the pay cut.
I've heard that joke about Shaq too.
Yeah. But anyway, guys like that. 3 years later, he would never even gone to college, and now he'd be one and done. And he was a man among boys. I mean, he just he stayed 2 years. Juwan and Jalen Rose stayed 3. The other guys weren't superstar players. They were really good quality players, but they weren't NBA types of players. But I just think it was different in that, ESPN was still kind of in its infancy. They didn't have, the 2 and the ESPNU and all that stuff and the ESPN News. And it was Big Ten basketball was still a big deal. And I can remember growing up, and even when I was playing, it was Big Monday. And it was the Big East game at 6. And then there was a Big Ten game at 8. And when I was playing, if you were on Big Monday, it was Syracuse, Georgetown at 6. And then we would play Indiana at 8. It was a big deal. So you'd basically play Monday or Tuesday and Saturday the entire season. And it was always, those weekend games were usually during the day, which they very rarely do now. I just think it was something where, again, there wasn't the TV packages that they have now. And again, we're in Iowa, so the winters be kind of tough. So you turn your TV on, and there's Iowa basketball. And then, who's that 6'9", kind of skinny kid from Indianola running up and down the court. Well, he's pretty good, and you watch him play and develop and get to know Chris, and he comes back to the metro area and does a lot of things, and then all of a sudden, the worst thing imaginable happens. So, yeah, it was quite a time.
So talking about that 92-93 season, this is going into your senior year, right? This is your last go-around in Iowa City. What are the expectations for that team heading into the year? Because, this is like prime Tom Davis, too. You got a bunch of good freshmen. This is Kenyon Murray's freshman season. You got Russ Millard is a redshirt freshman on that team. You got a bunch of, upperclassmen, yourself and Chris Street and Val Barnes. Like, this is a loaded team here. And it seems like the pipeline is full. So what are the expectations going into the year?
We talked about that. Coach Davis always talked about winning championships. And, back then you would go to like a holiday tournament. I think you went to Hawaii that year. No, we went to San Juan Shootout. Won that. So you talk about winning tournaments. And then you talk about winning the Amana Hawkeye Classic, which will bring people back. You win that tournament. Win the Big Ten Conference. There was no conference tournament at the time. But so you talk about winning the state championship. You talked about beating Drake, Iowa State, and UNI. Just little things. And then it was always the Final Four. We didn't talk about national championships because I always thought, and I think a lot of coaches still feel the same way, in that once you get to the Final Four, then you got to kind of figure things out. And it's just something. You got to have a lot of luck to get there. Got to win those 4, and then, hey, while we're here, let's win 2 more. But we talked about going to the Final Four, and we were good.
So that was one of the expectations.
Yeah, Kenyon was coming in. Russ Millard, who people forget, he was a second-round draft pick. Russ was a good player.
And he was just a
AC was
freshman.
A senior. Yeah, AC was a senior, and we were excited about the year.
Yeah, I was looking at the roster today, so I'm pulling it up. The starting 5 for that Michigan game, of course, Chris Street had passed by this point. So it's yourself, James Winters, AC Earl, Kevin Smith, Val Barnes. But then the depth is unbelievable. It's, I guess, similar to the Hawkeye team this year. Like, this year team is really deep, and you're not seeing a lot of that in college basketball now. But on the bench, you had Kenyon Murray, who jumps off the page, similar to his son.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now.
Kenyon was a great athlete.
Jay Webb played a lot. Jim Bartles, Russ Millard. Monteer Glasper. I forgot.
He was a freshman that year. Michigan kid.
Forgot about that guy.
Yeah.
And then you even had Kevin Skillett.
Yep.
And Kevin Skillett was like the 12th man, and I still remember him when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And then you had Chris Street as well. All 12 of those guys played in over 25 games that season for the Hawkeyes. I mean, Dr. Tom liked to play a lot of guys.
He did. Everybody played a lot, and he did a great job, allocating minutes. But Chris was the leader of our team. AC Earl was the best player. I don't know if I say that or not, but probably was at the time. AC was a pro, and Chris was only 20 when he was killed. He never reached his 21st birthday. So he was just kind of scratching the surface. You started to shoot the 3 more. Back then it wasn't incorporated like it is now, but the way Tom Davis' style played, it was the 4-man trailing. So the 4-man power forward would take the ball out of bounds. They'd push it up, swing it, and they'd swing it back to the 4-man. And a lot of times they had a wide open 3 after that initial fast break. Maybe didn't work out, and that Chris was getting really good at that. But Chris, I think at the time was second in the Big Ten in rebounding, maybe third, but Weber was leading it, and I think Chris was second. And again, he was only 20 years old. He was just getting started.
Yeah. Who else was good in the Big Ten at that time? I know Indiana was
loaded.
Yeah, they
Calvert
were like
Chaney,
one or two in the country at that point.
Yeah, they were good. Michigan State, I think they had Sean Respert.
Yep.
Mike Poplawski was gone. Maybe I forget.
Eric Snow.
Eric Snow was still there. They were really good. Illinois had Deion Thomas and all those Peoria guys were starting to filter in. They were really good. And then, it was really us and Michigan, kind of before the season started. Michigan had finished second. They were the runner-up the year before. They got blown out by Carolina, I think, I think Carolina beat them in the
Eric Montross.
Yeah, beat them bad in the finals, but they had everybody back. So they were the team to beat. But it just was going to be a special year. And we, like I said, we went through the preseason, and I think we beat Iowa State at home that year, beat them pretty easy. Went to San Juan, won the San Juan shootout. The Big Ten season didn't start. I forget how the schedule broke down, but I think we were 1-1, maybe even 0-1 going to Duke. And, Duke was a notch below what they had been, but they were, I forget now, I think they'd won 2 in a row, but then Leitner had graduated. In fact, maybe they beat Michigan that year. I forget, man. But anyway, Leitner was gone, but Grant Hill, Thomas Hill, Bobby Hurley, they still had great players.
Cherokee
Parks was down there. Tony Lang, who was a pro. But I think we went down to Duke ranked in the top 10. I think they were 3, we were 9. Again, another big CBS game. I think Billy Packer had that game too.
And you guys were you 10-0 at that point? Or because you started off 10-0.
Yeah, I forget. Okay, could be.
You started off 10-0, and maybe you had a loss right before that Duke game.
I think we'd gotten beat in the Big Ten. I think we'd gotten beat somewhere along the way. And but, we weren't scared of Duke. I think we were tied at half, and they beat us by 5 or 6. It was such a strange thing, too, because we played them Saturday afternoon and got beat. And then they played Virginia the next day. Virginia was good. They had Brian Stith, who was a pro for a long time, and got beat. So it just was a strange schedule that they would even agree to play us and then play again the next afternoon. But anyway, we went down there and tied at half, lost by 5 or 6. And Chris was great. I think he had 16 and 8, and he was the best player on the field, on the court.
Yeah, you bring that up. So he was the best player on the court that day. I haven't rewatched that Duke game, but you just talked about everybody that Duke had. And Bobby Hurley, I think, was a lottery pick. Obviously, Grant Hill, lottery pick. A lot of pros on that team. What stood out about Chris to make you say he was the best player on the floor that day?
I think he was just tougher than everybody else. ACR was really good, and he had a good game that day too. But Chris was just tougher. I think he could rebound, and people talk about he wasn't that great of an athlete, but he really was. I mean, I think there's different types of athleticism. There's the Dominique Wilkins athleticism where you can just jump out of the gym. Just God has gifted you, had made you special. But Chris was one of the fastest kids on the team. His hand-eye coordination was unbelievable. Great footwork for a big guy. And there'd be times in practice where he would just come down the lane and just dunk on somebody, and you'd be like, "Wow, who's that kid? Where did that come from?" And again, 20 years old, almost 21, just scratching the surface. But to answer your question, he was the toughest kid on the court, and that transitioned into be the best player.
You were a few years older than Chris.
Yep.
So you saw his development. What was the word on him when he was coming to Iowa?
Yeah, so Chris was 2 years younger than I was. So I played 2 years at Iowa, had a back injury.
Right.
And that was Chris's freshman year, did not play. And then I played 2 more years with Chris. But we had gone out after I graduated from high school my senior year. This is really going to sound old, but the summer of 1988.
I was 2.
Yes, there you go. Thanks for mentioning that. We went to like an AAU tournament, national AAU tournament out in Virginia Beach. And it was a big deal. Like Alonzo Mourning was there.
Nice.
Chris Gent was there, played at Ohio State. He was playing with a bunch of kids from New Jersey. I mean, there were good players there. And we had, myself, Morgan Wheat, Jay Goodman, Brian Pearson, Troy Skinner.
Oh, these are all,
we had a good
these are
team
all
too.
North Central Iowa guys.
But we didn't have a lot of size. So we picked up this sophomore kid from Indianola who had made the all-tournament team that spring at the state tournament. And we really didn't know who he was, but he showed up and he was tough and he battled. So we saw it even back then, just glimpses of what he could do. And he was a great athlete, baseball, football, came to Iowa, I think he started day one. I think he started that first game, which is really, that's a rare thing because we had a pretty good team even when he was coming in. But he was just different, just tough, and got to be a really, when he first came, not super skilled, but he worked in there every night, ball handling, shooting, rebounding, getting strong. And it just carried over as you saw how he played. Well,
this is midway through his junior year at this point. And you mentioned he was your team leader. And this is a team with a bunch of upperclassmen on it, yourself and Val Barnes and like James Winters. And there's
A.C.
a bunch.
Earl was a fifth year.
A.C. Earl's a fifth-year guy. Like, why was Chris Street your leader?
It's a good question. I think it just was something where, so first off, he was really vocal and emotional. And I think you need that from your leader. If you look at Iowa's team now, some of those guys never change facial expressions. I mean, Joe Wieskamp, and I love Joe. I love his game. I think he's a pro, but he never changes expression.
Stephen Bardo doesn't shut up about it either.
Yeah. But I think Aaron White was like that. I think Jared Utoff was like that. Keegan Murray's like that. Even Connor's got a little bit of edge to him, but just Chris had that fire, and man, he loved playing for Iowa. He always wanted to be a Hawk. He committed in his sophomore year of high school, which at the time was unheard of. And everybody else had offers. AC Earl had offers to go other places. Val Barnes had other offers. James Winters, but Chris he made one visit. He had one offer, and he took it, and he never looked back. So I think he put the most emphasis on winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that translated to why he was the leader of the team.
Now, sometimes with like new guys onto a team, especially if you have like a bunch of upperclassmen leaders, and you and AC Earl were a couple years older than Chris, and you get a guy that comes in and they're just Johnny All-American, right? They are playing to the whistle, playing a little after the whistle. They're winning every conditioning drill. And sometimes it rubs guys the wrong way. Was there ever any of that with Chris early on before he earned his stripes a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Chris, he was
because when I look at him, you know what I mean? Like,
he was an asshole.
But after a while, like a Rudy Rudiger, and he's not Rudy Rudiger, but I'm just saying, like it takes a little bit while to be like, this is truly what he's legit, right? Like he's earned his stripes here.
Well, I think when you come in as a freshman, you get tested. I can remember Roy Marble kind of squaring off with me, and you just can't back down. And Chris didn't back down, and he was good too. And probably the most important thing is he wanted to rebound and set screens and do all the little things as a freshman, So, by the way, he was really skilled and got to be a great player. But when he first came in, he would rebound, play defense, and kind of worked his way into that rotation. I think as a freshman, he only averaged 5 and 5. It wasn't like he lit it up. Sophomore got better. Then as a junior now, he's starting to physically mature, 6'9", 230, run, jump. That's when he really got to be a player. So everybody accepted Chris because he's such a good dude, and you liked him as he's kind of stomping on your head a little bit.
And he's doing what it takes to get the team, make the team better.
And he's on our team. He's on our team. But I can remember, I think one of the last things, we were running line drills. It might have even been after the Duke game or before. I forget how things fall. But we split, I think we lost, I want to say Minnesota, then lost to Duke and came back. And we had a hard practice, which was not the norm because we were supposed to play Northwestern, I think, that Tuesday night. And we divided up into 2 equal teams, and my team got beat, and Chris's team won, and the losing team had to run, line drills, and he's on the sideline laughing. And I remember I was mad. I said some things to him, but again, it's okay because we would have done the same thing to him.
Oh yeah,
it's part of being a team, and he wasn't. Yeah, he just was a tough, hard-nosed kid who, oh, by the way, was 6'9" and could run and jump and do all those things.
So let's talk about like the game plan for Iowa that year. Like, what type of team are you? What's when you guys are going out there for a Big Ten game, and I know things change from depending on who you're playing in the scouting reports, but what are you guys in that 92-93 season trying to accomplish as a team? So
again, you got to remember now the 3-point line is still kind of in its infancy. It's not utilized like it is now. 45. Can you imagine 45-second shot clock? But for us, it was the same thing every year with Tom Davis. We're going to fast break, we're going to out-rebound teams, and we're just going to try to outscore them, and we're going to press. So with our team, we had AC Earl, who was a lottery pick that year with the Celtics. He would get a touch every time down. And then after that, it was really the first good shot you could get. So Chris would still get a lot of his points in fast breaks and putbacks, that 4-man trailing, talk about hitting threes, or they would double Ace, and he would dish to Chris. Ace was a great passer. I mean, unbelievable. And Chris would get a lot of points there. So it was just fast break, and we're gonna out rebound teams.
Well, the thing that I noticed when I'm watching that, I watched the Michigan State game and I watched the Michigan game over the last couple of days. In that press, I remembered it as a kid, but there's like 2 different forms of the press. Or maybe it's just one form, but like there were times when you're guarding the inbounder And a lot of times it was you at the point, you're guarding the inbounder, or you're letting them get in, but then you're still playing the point of that like 1-2-1-1 press, trying to force them to a side and kind of waiting to trap them, if you will, but mostly just forcing them into bad passes.
So really how they broke it up is it was either a 55, which was full court, or 45. Okay, so 55 was the full court press, guard the inbounds passer, deny the inbounds pass. That was the 55. The 45 then was you didn't guard the inbounds passer, let them get in, and then you work the point guard up, and then you trap in the corners. So,
and it's almost like Fran's running a portion of that 45 today.
They do that with that 1-2-1-1 or one. Whatever they do with either Wieskamp or even Patrick McCaffrey.
Patrick McCaffrey's
so long.
good at it.
He's so long, and that's what
Aaron White
was.
used to be good at it.
They're just
too.
long. Those long guys. Yeah, for sure.
So I haven't watched kind of the pre-Michigan State stuff. Would Chris run the point on that?
So we do it both ways. The 45, the 55 was designed to try to get a steal and score to speed the game up.
Yep.
And then the 45 kind of slowed the game down a little bit. So depending on where we were at in the game, the score, all that stuff, but it was pretty much 55 from the get-go.
Because I'm watching it, you're running the point of that a lot of times.
You try to work them up. You try to turn them. You try to turn them as much as you can, and then here come the wings to trap. Yeah, it's really simple.
You had a pretty good defensive stance.
Not bad.
There, Wade.
Not bad. I just was trying to survive and not get beat too bad. Yeah.
Okay, so 10-0 start, and you go to Duke. And you're just talking about before we have on air, and I want to make sure we get some of this, is like the night out at Duke. Because this is still winter break. University of Iowa is not back at school yet. And so you guys are able to stay an extra night.
So we flew down there Friday. It was I don't want to say it was a weird tip, like a 2 o'clock or maybe 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So we flew down Friday. And I don't think anybody had been at Duke. Nobody had been in the arena. And even though we're playing at Iowa, ranked in the top 10, it's still Duke. It's the mecca.
Yeah, did it have that
cachet?
Absolutely, even at that time?
Absolutely,
and Cameron Indoor and all that stuff?
It's really strange how small it is. I think it seats 8,000, maybe not even that, 7,500 people. Reminds me a lot of the Knapp Center without that walkway, but it's tiny. Uh-huh. So
this is by the way, this is the only time ever that Cameron Indoor will be compared to the Knapp Center.
Drake's got it going on, but so we flew down and we just kept it as a normal game. So we flew down, went right to the arena for practice, and it was, I want to say 7 o'clock at night on a Friday night, and we looked around a little bit because it's kind of cool, and they got trophies that we didn't have and jerseys retired, and we practiced there that night, and I think this is kind of what you want me to mention about the students is we always had open practices, whether at home, on the road. If you want to come watch our practice, Coach Davis was like, come on in. And I bet, again, Friday night at Duke, I bet there were a couple hundred people at the practice, a lot of them students. And I remember they sat way up top, on the top row, and they were quiet. They weren't disruptive. They had their book bags, most of them did, and they were studying. But then I bet a large percentage of them were drinking beer and kind of hanging out on so
wild.
So that was their social thing. They were going to study, have a couple of beers, and watch basketball.
How fun as a college student would it be to like pregame before you go out to the bars, watching the University of Iowa practice at Cameron Indoor with the 6-pack, and then you head to the
with
bars.
That triangle down there. You got that Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and then so you got. Within, I don't even know what it is, 20 miles, 15 miles, you got Duke, Carolina, NC State.
Isn't Wake Forest
and then Wake
pretty
Forest
close?
Is right there too, not too far away. So you got all these schools, but the main ones are Raleigh, Durham, which is NC State, Chapel Hill, Carolina, and Duke. I mean, Duke and North Carolina are 8 miles apart.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy. So it is the basketball mecca, and we practiced Friday night. We had a good practice, and we were ready to go the next day.
And you get beaten in a pretty good game against Duke.
Yeah.
But then you guys stick around, and you guys...
Again,
you got to go out and party.
It was something where it's just funny how things work out, because that ended up being Chris's last game. He tied or broke the consecutive free throw record.
34 in a row, I think.
34 in a row. I had a dear friend of mine from Fort Dodge happened to be living in Charlotte at the time. And he had seen our schedule. And he's like, man, I'm in Charlotte. It's not that far away. Can I get a couple tickets to the Duke game? And we always got tickets on the road, but Duke's a little different. They're pretty tight with their tickets. So I said, man, I can get you one ticket. So my buddy came, Chris Reek, dear friend of mine. And then for some reason, Chris Street's good friend came down too. I don't know if he just came down because it was Duke or he was in town. But anyway, so he's there and my friend's there, and Chris plays great. Again, best player on the floor, had 16 and 8. And we couldn't get a flight out because it was an odd time, and again, we're on break. So we stay overnight. And I guess like all good college kids who aren't in class yet, we go out. And man, we have a good time. And we meet, I think it was Ralph Lauren's grandson or son. I mean, it's Duke. So you've got senators and congressmen and CEOs' kids are in school. And I remember that, everybody loved Chris. They just flocked to Chris. And that's how it was with girls and boys and kids and grandmas and, women and men. And everybody just loved to be around Chris. And these people all watched the game, either were at the game or watched it. And they saw how well he played and how he was, again, the best player on the court. And they just wanted to be around him. It was like the Pied Piper. It was a really cool thing to witness. And again, looking back, last time he played.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course, January 19th of 93, just a couple of days later, a couple of days after that Duke game, you had mentioned, before we started recording that at that time, the night before games, you guys all stayed in the Highlander Hotel, and Chris had a night class. He's going to night class, and he gets hit by a snowplow.
Yeah, so I think I have this right. Maybe my days are wrong, but so we played Duke Saturday, got beat, stayed overnight Saturday night, flew home Sunday, and I think I told you incorrectly, but I think classes started Tuesday. So we had Monday practice, and then classes started Tuesday, and we were supposed to play Northwestern Wednesday. I think that's how it fell. So I think it started because Coach Davis didn't want people in the dorms the night before a game because it's, a lot of distractions, a lot going on. So every home game when I was at Iowa, I don't know if they still do it or not, but we always stayed at the Highlander, at the hotel. And you could go out there and eat. That was you got one meal a day. So you go out there and eat anytime between 5 and 10, just order food, eat, and you had to be back in your room by 10 or 10:30. So classes started that day. So again, Tuesdays, first day of class, Wednesday's supposed to be the game. So Northwestern's already in town. I went out to eat early because I was going to go shoot that night in the gym, just get a quick workout in, and then go back out to the hotel. Chris had a night class, so he went out a little later, and I want to say his night class was supposed to start at 7. So he went out at 8, was heading to his class, and that's when everything went to hell. And then, the phone started ringing again, pre-cell phones, pre-social media. So it took a while to kind of get in touch with everybody. And
where were you when you heard the news?
I was so I was at my apartment, and it's funny the things you remember. I was watching the Michigan-Indiana game was on TV, and that's why I think it was But anyway, and the head manager called me. His name was Kevin Ralston. In fact, he still does the book. He's one of the few people that's actually at the Iowa games now anymore, but because of COVID. But he was our head manager, and he and I were going to work out. We were going to get together and have a workout at, I don't know, I'm saying it was 8:30, and this was maybe 6:30. And he called me again, no pre-cell phones. Calls my apartment, and he's very emotional, and I said, Kevin, what's wrong? And the first thing I thought was it was my family, my parents or something. And he just says, Wade, you need to come to the arena right now. Come to the locker room. And I was like, what is going on? He says, just get to the arena right now. And I said, Kevin, you have to tell me what's going on. And he said, Chris has been in a car accident. So that's all I know. Drive to the arena, and it's just, again, it's chaos. And everything is, nobody knows for sure, this and that. And again, the things you remember. But Kevin Skillett, you mentioned Kevin, who's the AD now. He actually was the AD at Bettendorf. I think he's a principal now in the Bettendorf school system. But Kevin pulled me aside in the tunnel going into the locker room before you went to the locker room. He pulled me aside. He said, hey, Wade, I just want to let you know that Chris was killed. And it's just the things that you never forget. And then again, everything kind of, they get us all in the locker room and Coach Davis breaks the news to everybody. We all kind of knew before that, they had to confirm. And again, it's just, they had to get a hold of Chris's family who was watching his sister Sarah's basketball game at Des Moines Lincoln or something, because they had to get a hold of state troopers and pull them out of the stand, and all these things they had to do before things started to break. And and then it just was, there was an awful ice storm that next day. I remember I was in a car accident the next day and hit this minivan. It just was, just all these things. And and then it was just kind of survival mode, planning for the funeral and just all these things. And then 8 days later, we have a basketball game.
Yeah, that's, I think, what struck me maybe the most out of all this stuff as I look back on it is how you guys still went about your season. And I don't know what the answer is, but it was crazy to me looking back of like the timeline. Like I think that Michigan game was on the 28th. I'm not sure exactly when the Michigan State game, but it's probably 3-4 days before that, and so you guys are playing, I think, less than a week. You canceled the Northwestern game, which was scheduled for the next day.
We canceled one other. I think it was maybe Minnesota. Again, I forget. But we postponed 2 games.
2 games.
2 games, yeah.
But it wasn't very long. I mean, this was the heart of conference season.
Yeah.
You guys are back on the court. How long was it before, like, you had another shoot-around or you had a practice?
Well, I can remember. I think we practiced the day of the funeral even. We practiced just because, you still had to. I mean, a lot of us went over for the visitation. I think it was – we practiced after the funeral. I think we came back and because, we still had a season to prepare for. They weren't going to give us a month off,
right?
So I think we had, and it just was, the visitation and the funeral, and it just was such a crazy time. And then I always tell people too that basketball was really kind of the easy part. Mm-hmm. Chris wasn't there, but it was like he was injured or he was on the bench getting ready, just getting a break, just getting a blow. He was going to come back in. So the basketball was the easy part. That 1 to 3:30 when we had practice, those 2.5 hours, that was kind of the easier part. It was everything else when you're trying to, get, just again, the visitation, the funeral, all that stuff was just unbelievable.
You guys are young. You guys are kids at this time, and did you have grief counselors? Like today, there'd be professional help. There'd be a lot of these resources available more today than might have been. I don't know. Yeah. I'm curious as to.
You're right. It would have been much different now, but I think I went and talked to somebody one time, and it was it was fine. It was a different era, man. It was different. It just was. Again, the cell phone, social media have changed things so much that you just kind of. It sounds kind of bad to say, but the season went on. We still had games that we had Michigan coming in and Indiana coming in, and
right.
They were really sad and sorry, and we're so sad that Chris died, but
they wanted to beat you.
Yeah. We didn't want to get embarrassed, if nothing else, just because to honor his legacy and to try to represent any way we could.
So you guys have to kind of regroup and get it together at Michigan State, which is kind of universally in the Big Ten, either the toughest place or the second toughest place.
It was the first year of the Breslin Center. So it was the first, so they had it's not new anymore, but so this is again 93. I think it was a Thursday we flew up there to play, and moment of silence before the game, and we had practiced, but your heart really wasn't in it. And they were still good. That Michigan State, they had Sean Resper, who was a pro. Eric Snow played along Allen Iverson with those 76ers team. Yep. Big Anthony Miller played for the Lakers for a while. The assistant coach, who's been there for 30 years now. What's his name? Not Greg.
Oh, I know exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know his name, but I can
he's
see
gained
him
a bunch of weight
Izzo.
now. Dwayne Stevens, but he was a great player. All those guys were good. And And it was just a weird night, it just was, a moment of silence, and then the crowd just erupts, and we're just getting blown out, and coach doesn't know what to say, and we don't know what to do, and it got out of hand. It got ugly.
Yeah, you guys are down. I mean, you're down big, like the whole game. But then all of a sudden, like 3 minutes left, you're down 15. And literally on the broadcast, they're talking about the game being over. Like they're having small talk. The announcer just having small talk
was
about other
supposed to
things.
play maybe UCLA. They were going to cut to that, or they were kind of leading into that. And you're right. They were talking about how give Iowa a lot of credit for even
it's got to be tough
here.
on the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, we were down 15, I think, with 3:29 to go, and again, 45-second shot clock. There's no way Michigan State should have lost that game. But Eric Snow was an unbelievable player. I mean, 12-year pro, an NBA player, but he was the worst high major Division I free throw shooter ever. I mean, it just was so bad, and they didn't take him out of the game. We kept fouling him, and they turned it over a couple times, and
you're right in the middle of it too, because you're at the point of this press.
I was trying to,
lots of problems with the press,
and we had to keep fouling because again, you can't let the clock run down, and again, they get an offensive rebound, the clock resets to 45. It doesn't it's not 30 to 20 like it is now. So, but it just was something where divine intervention, whatever it is, they kept missing those free throws, and Val Barnes just kept nailing threes, and ACRO got a couple and ones, and Val hits a three with like 6 or 7 seconds left to tie it, and they throw up some crappy half-court shot, and it's just they are dejected, and it is just, Tom Izzo is a young assistant on the bench, and it's just everybody knew it was over. Once we came back to tie it to get it to overtime, we just imposed our will and just
What was that locker room like after the Michigan State game?
It was
the first game after.
It was pretty powerful. I tell you, there were a lot of tears shed, a lot of excitement, and I remember, again, the only guy that I knew that had a cell phone was our trainer, John Streif, and it was one of those
in a bag type things.
No. Well, it was the big brick, almost like a shoebox,
Zach Morris style.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And Paul Lusk, who was Chris's really good friend, had transferred out to Southern Illinois, and he's now an assistant coach over at Creighton. And he and Chris were still really good friends, and Paul and I are good friends. I think we've remained friends probably even closer because of all this. But we called him that night, and that's why I remember talking to Paul, and just it just was something where it was really special that there were 15 guys in the locker room, now only 14. And it was just a really emotional, amazing experience. Little did we know, 3 days later, we were going to do it all over again.
Yeah, so 3 days later, I think it was January 28th.
Yeah.
Super Bowl Sunday. We mentioned it earlier. It's the first game back at Carver-Hawkeye.
This was on the schedule. This was not a makeup game. I think the Michigan State game was also on the schedule. So this was the real deal. Fab Five coming in. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest game in the country outside of the Super Bowl that day.
Yeah.
And what are the emotions like before the game? Because you have what I thought was cool is you go back and watch this. I mean, it's less than 2 weeks after the passing of Chris Street. There's already a memorial foundation set up.
Yeah.
They've already retired his jersey, and
So just a couple things. So it was a noon tip against CBS, like you mentioned, Super Bowl Sunday. So the Cowboys are playing at 5:30. So can you imagine now? It's 12 hours of pregame. It's a week of pregame. Yet here we were on from noon to 2, and the Super Bowl was going to kick at 5:30. So it was really a unique time, and it was Michigan coming in with Weber, Rose, Joanne Howard, the Fab Five. But it was really unique in that people forget, and they still do it today, but what schools do, so we had a noon tip. So we were on the court at 5 a.m. in our shoot. I'm sorry. We were on the court at 7 a.m. for our shoot around because you always ate 4 hours before the game. So you got to get up early, get to the arena, get a little sweat going, shoot around, shoot some free throws, go through the game plan, go and eat your pregame meal at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's just a weird vibe. And everybody's excited because it's Michigan and it's the first home game and Chris's family is going to be there. It's just a lot of things. There were a lot of distractions besides the basketball game.
Yeah, and even watching kind of that pregame ceremony, like Kenyon Murray's crying, like a lot of guys are crying. Like, was there any part of you that thought, I don't know if I'm ready to play a basketball game, and I'm sure as heck not ready to guard Juwan Howard?
It's just the strangest thing, and I tell people this too. I told you earlier when we were talking, but so we would go out about 20. So noon tip, you get to the arena like at 10:30. Get taped, shoot a couple shots, say hi to your family, friends, all that good stuff. Come back in the locker room, put your uniform on, and then we would go out to the floor as a team for our team warm-ups 25 minutes before the game. And usually people at Carver are, late getting there. They're getting some ice cream, some pizza, whatever they're doing. And then as the game, as it gets closer to tip-off, that's when the arena starts to fill up. So here it is 25 minutes before the game. It's the only time in my entire career when I can remember every seat was full when we were running out of the tunnel, again, 25 minutes before the game was supposed to tip. So everybody was ready. And then they had this ceremony. So
right.
Here you are, you go through warm-ups, and it's just looking back, it just was like this, memorial to this warrior, your teammate, and then they do the introductions. So it just was like so strange. You mourn for him, but like I said, then once the game started, you had to get playing because you got lottery picks,
right?
Down the way that are very sad that your teammates passed away, killed, but they still want to win the game.
Yeah, they're playing on CBS on Super Bowl Sunday.
They don't really care.
It's fascinating when you go back and watch that because they're doing the warm-ups or they're doing the introductions. And there is no video board. There is no dark in the arena.
There's no smoke and fire.
It was just literally, the
hype videos. Yeah.
The announcer saying, starting at forward, Wade Lookingbill. Yeah. Starting at forward, Rob Pelinka.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. What's he doing now? By the way,
right.
He's the GM of the Lakers. Yeah, he makes more money than anybody on that on that list.
The starting five for the Hawks were Wade Lookingbill, James Winters, A.C. Earl, Kevin Smith, and Val Barnes. The Michigan Wolverines. We got Rob Pelinka, GM of the Lakers.
He was Kobe's agent. He's an attorney.
Right.
Yeah.
Chris Webber.
Yeah.
He'll be in the Hall of Fame here in the next couple of years. Juwan Howard, current head coach of Michigan. And then you had Jimmy King, Jalen Rose, who's still, front
does a great job. Yeah.
Ray Jackson was coming back from an injury, so he didn't start, but he played most of the game.
He didn't start? Is that right?
He did not start. You had Pelinka started in Jackson's
that's right. I see.
Place.
Yeah.
And then and also another guy I forgot about was that Eric Riley.
Eric Riley was a 10-year pro. Yeah.
Man.
Michael Talley, who wasn't that great a player, but he was 5'10". He was Mr. Basketball at Michigan. He hardly played once those guys came. They were loaded.
They were absolutely loaded, and the place was packed. I don't know if I've ever seen Carver-Hawkeye as alive as it was that day. It was almost like they brought in more floor seats around the hoop. I've never seen fans as crowded around the court as they were that day. Was it? Did they change that at some point?
I don't know if they did or not. They very well could have, because the fire codes and things were a little less enforced than they are now. But and it was Michigan. Chris has been killed and that's awful. But nobody liked Michigan. Nobody liked the Fab Five, and they were really good. They were extremely talented, and it just was a battle.
What's the scouting report on Michigan? Like, what's Tom Davis say to slow down Jalen Rose and Chris Webber?
Yeah, no. A couple things he said is make him shoot it from outside. Again, this is back when the 3-pointer was really almost like an ancillary part of the offense. It's hard to even imagine it would be that way now.
Yeah, it's like nobody had done the math yet.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one thing. Try to push him out. Even, don't let Weber catch it, within 10 feet because he's going to dunk on you. Make him catch it at 14 feet, and then you had a double. Jalen Rose wasn't a great ball handler at point guard, so we really wanted to work him up. We thought they weren't in great shape. All those things like that, just little things that maybe might, get you a couple extra baskets, might get you a couple extra possessions, and we weren't bad. We were still ranked 12th, I think, at the time. I kind of forget, but we were still a good team. Even though we lost Chris, we talked about, hey, let's regroup. Let's see what we can do. Let's just hold it together for a couple weeks, for a couple months. We'll get better, And then once the tournament comes, we still had high aspirations.
Yeah, you're right. Because even though you watch this game, even though Michigan has so much talent, like it's crazy how much talent was on that court for Michigan, they couldn't shoot that well.
Yeah.
I mean, Pelinka was one of their better three-point shooters. He shot one time, he airballed it. They had a Voskuhl, like Jake Voskuhl's older brother, who actually played a lot of minutes in this game. He was a pretty good shooter off of the bench.
Yeah.
But Jalen Rose was not a good three-point shooter.
Even Ray Jackson was not that good. Jimmy King could shoot it. Juwan Howard wouldn't shoot a three. Weber once in a while. But again, we would give them that shot because we don't want them going to the basket.
And then because of that,
silly, you
guys got AC Earl, who's a great shot blocker, clogging the lane.
Yep.
You had yourself and Russ Millard, James Winters. I mean, you got a bunch of big athletic guys where it's like, if we're going to play this game in the paint, we can bang with the best of them, especially with, Kenyon Murray coming off the bench, who was, I've forgotten how good of an athlete Kenyon Murray was. He really jumped off the page in that game.
He was special. Yeah, absolutely. And it was a big game for him. Michigan kid. I think he'd visited Michigan, and
he might have been Mr. Basketball in Michigan.
Yeah, Kenyon was McDonald's All-American. Yep, absolutely. So it just was, and Russ Millard, I think his first game as a Hawkeye might have been at Michigan State. I don't think he had played till then, maybe even the Michigan game, because he had some grade issues or something, so we had to wait till the second semester started. And Russ was a pro. I mean, Russ was 6'9", jump out of the gym, so nobody had any idea who Russ was, and he's like catching lobs and going to the basket. He was a really talented kid.
Yeah, so that game tips off, and right away it's all Michigan. It's like Chris Webber pops out and hits a three right away. Juwan Howard catches one from 16 feet, knocks it down. Jalen Rose slashes to the hoop and gets one. And you're thinking like, oh boy, is Iowa on its heels because of all this emotional stuff with Chris Street now? Did you guys feel any of that when they get out to a 9-0 lead? Like, maybe the magic is running out here.
Well, it wasn't the best of starts, that's for sure. But that's kind of how we played. We would whenever Tom Davis's teams played, when he was at Boston College, Stanford, Iowa, even when he was at Drake, it was fast paced up and down. You would give up 6-8 points because you were probably going to go on a 14-2 run pretty quick. So I think we called a timeout or something. I kind of forget now, but nobody was really worried because it had happened before. It happened in Michigan State.
Right.
We just kept doing what we were going to do, is pound it inside to AC, pressure their guards. They were big, but we thought they weren't great ball handlers, which they really weren't, and then just play our game.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, the fast-paced thing. I think a lot of people, if you go back and watch a game from that era, you might be surprised at how fast the pace is. And I think a lot of that is because so much of the game was played in the paint, played towards the baseline, that like you could turn almost every rebound into a fast-break bucket if you really push the pace. And that first 10 minutes is really frenetic pace, especially like Kevin Smith running the point. He liked to
Kevin
really
was quick.
He took some ill-advised shots.
Yeah, Kevin wasn't the best shooter, but
he liked
could
to
go.
really push the pace.
Yeah, he really did. And he was the perfect point guard for a Tom Davis system. Didn't want to shoot a lot, but man, he would somebody get a rebound, kick it to him, and they were off, and it was go. And it was something where we would still shoot threes on the break, but if it wasn't there, get AC a touch, get it inside, draw fouls. That was always a big thing with Coach Davis. Hey, let's get in the one-on-one, the 1-and-1 as soon as we can.
Yep.
And they called it pretty close in that Michigan game. We shot a ton of free throws, but part of that I think was just the style we played. We were aggressive. We took it right at them. We get our shot blocked once or twice, but you get a couple fouls on those bigs. That was to our advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Even though Michigan gets out to that 9-0 lead, Chris Webber gets 2 quick fouls on a couple, maybe phantom over the back calls by Eddie Hightower.
Yeah.
And then even Eric Riley, 7-footer off the bench, both of those guys had 3 fouls in the first half. And but what stuck out to me, is Webber's athleticism is insane. Like if you're a younger guy, or even if you're in your 20s and you only saw maybe the last 5 years of Chris Webber's NBA career after microfracture surgery, and you never saw like this Chris Webber, it's unbelievable how, like you said, if he gets within 5 feet, he's dunking.
Yeah, he was different than all 5 of those guys. Again, Ray Jackson, Jimmy King, they were top. They were really good college players, but I don't know if either one ever scored an NBA basket. And Jalen Rose was going to be a pro, you could tell, and Juwan Howard was so skilled, but But Weber was different. He was like a professional wrestler out there, just hands and strength. And oh, by the way, could just jump out of the gym, pass, and he never said a word. Those Jalen Rose is blah 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 blah. Juwan Howard, Jimmy, Ray Jackson would talk a lot, and Weber never said a word. And it just was something where he was different, even then compared to those other guys. And you could argue that Juwan Howard had a better pro career, longer, but Weber was really talented, and he was the key. We couldn't let him dunk on us and catch lobs and get easy baskets. And we were very fortunate with the foul trouble. I'd kind of forgotten that till I watched the replay a couple weeks ago, but that was definitely to our advantage.
Yeah, I was surprised. You mentioned he didn't say a word because I think 2 out of the 3 calls on him in the first half were questionable, and he didn't say anything to the refs. And nowadays, Luka Garza, as good as he is, he's every foul he has, he's got something to say with the refs. And a lot of guys are that way. It's just kind of the commonplace.
Yeah.
Like there's more chirping at the refs, it seems like today in basketball than there was that day. And Weber never said a word, but a couple of phantom calls.
Yeah, they called it really close, and maybe they said that before the game started with all the emotion. Because usually in the Big Ten, they let teams play. It was something where. But you forget this is like the pinnacle of Big Ten basketball. I mean, so this is 93. So Chris Webber was going to be the first pick in the draft in 93. In 94, it was Glenn Robinson was going to be the first pick in the NBA draft. Calbert Chaney came out in, I forget now, 93, and he was the 3rd pick in the draft. And,
and this is right after Steve Smith.
Steve Smith was a great player. Michigan with Ramil Robinson and Terry Mills had won the title in 89. Illinois had made the final. I mean, this was the golden era of Big Ten basketball. Whereas, some of those top, Chris Webber was the number 1 player in the country, went to Michigan. Right. Glenn Robinson was one of the last Prop 48 guys. He was also in that class. He went to Purdue. But again, it just was so talented. But we did get a break, how closely they called that game.
One call I got to ask you about. In the first half, you come in and you're setting a screen on Jalen Rose.
Yeah, it was crazy.
You're moving.
It just was.
You're still moving a little bit, but he gives you a shoulder.
Lowers his shoulder.
He definitely does.
Yeah, I'd forget, and I think he helps me up, or Ray Jackson helps me up, or somebody does, and I think we were all just kind of like, that foul's on the Iowa kid, because I think Michigan thought I was going to be on them. It was really strange, and yeah, I got a lot of texts when that happened too. Way to get knocked on your butt and all this stuff, and.
What's funny about it too is Billy Packer's the color guy, and he was the color guy.
He's blaming me.
He was like,
I know.
Great call by the ref.
I know.
Lookingibill's definitely moving there. And I'm like laughing. It's like, okay, whatever, however technical you want to call this, but like Jalen Rose definitely lowers his shoulder right into your sternum.
Yeah, it was. I just was kind of running down again, I'd forgotten about that, but yeah. But again, it just was something where bang, bang, play, and I'm the one that, gets knocked to the ground, but yeah.
Yeah, so Michigan, like we said earlier, they get off to that hot start. You guys get your footing a little bit. It's kind of a back and forth first half. Mm-hmm. There's a big play towards the end of the first half where Kenyon Murray hits a 3 and the foul, 4-point play where you guys get your first lead to tie it up, and then it goes into halftime, 44-44. Really good first half, really good Big Ten basketball. At halftime, what's Tom Davis like at halftime? Is there a lot of rah-rah speeches, or what's the Hawkeye locker room like?
The same halftime all the other 165 times we had a halftime. One of the assistant coaches, Gary Close, I think it was, who was at Iowa forever and was a dear, dear friend of Chris, and ended up at Wisconsin for a long time too. But he would say, "Hey, we're halfway there, halfway." The coaches would talk. You only had 15 minutes.
Right.
And it was always kind of a chaotic time. We used to change jerseys at halftime. I always think that's kind of interesting. Because again, Carver's hot. There's no air conditioning. It's still hot. There's no air conditioning. Those lights are those old, they're not the kind of cool halogen lights or whatever, the LED lights. They are hot. There's 15,000. It is hot in there. So your jersey is just soaking wet. So you put a different jersey on. Some guys would change their shorts, but go to the bathroom, the coaches talk, they come in and they write stuff on the board, and you kind of half listen to them.
Exactly.
You never really listen to them because, we're what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to box out and get a rebound and make your free throws and go back out. You kind of get loose and go play again. But it was the same halftime. I think that was really good. Like, we would talk about those 8 or 9 or 10 days since Chris was killed, the funeral, the Michigan State game. We would discuss Chris, but then basketball was basketball. And looking back, I think that really helped us. And I give Coach Davis a lot of credit in that he tried to keep some sense of normalcy. It was something where, hey, awful, tragic, we are so sad, just devastated, but hey, it's 1 to 3:30, it's basketball practice.
You mentioned the jerseys and those gold Hawkeye jerseys.
Those are awesome, aren't they?
Maybe the best Hawkeye jerseys I've ever seen, especially with the kind of IOWA basketball logo that you had on the warm-ups at that time. Like, that might be the best Iowa Hawkeye basketball jersey ever. And you guys wore those golds at Michigan and at home, or at Michigan State, and then home against Michigan. Did you wear the golds for most games that year?
So we had 3 sets, and teams will do that now, but it was kind of a big deal back then. And they had to get those patches sewed on too, the CMS, the Christopher Michael Street patch, and so that was a big deal too. But so we would wear, like basketball, you were whites at home, light color at home, dark on the road, and then you had gold you could wear for special games, and you could wear them at home or on the road.
Right.
And so I know we wore them that year in the Iowa State game. I think we wore them at Duke. I forget. We probably did. And then, I doubt we would have worn them at Michigan State, except with the way everything happened. Yeah. Well, no, just with the golds. Do you wear the golds up there? Did you see?
You wore them at Michigan State.
So I don't think we would have wore the golds up there, but we definitely would have worn them. I mean, obviously without the patch, if Chris would not have been killed. But just so we wore those gold uniforms for big games.
Let's get to the second half here.
Yeah.
44-44 at halftime. You come out in the second half, and there's an interesting, I think this is a Tom Davis thing that I wanted to ask you about, where you guys played man-to-man out of bounds plays, but then you would switch to a zone once the ball got in. Like, how does that work? How does
Yeah, it's really simpler than playing zone out of bounds. I think zones have their place, and they're really easy to get back. Like Tom Davis played zone. So again, going back to that press, we would go 55-15, which meant full court press. You get one chance to trap, and then you sprint back into the 15 zone. Or you'd go 55-10. So 10 was the man-to-man. So you could go, again, so you could go 55-45, 35-15, or you could go 50-40-30-10.
Sure.
There was no 20. I don't know why, but so out of bounds, we would go 10 we could go 10, which is man-to-man, right into 15. So you'd match up, and it was actually easier. Now, some of that had to do with Michigan's personnel. We felt we couldn't play zone as an out-of-bounds play against Michigan because they're just so athletic and they're going to throw lobs. So you go man-to-man. Once the ball comes in, then you just transition back into the zone.
But what if you get a bad matchup there? Or, what if you get Kevin Smith all of a sudden has to chase his man down to the block, It
can happen. It can happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But it worked okay. We got burned probably a couple times, and
right.
Like you always do. But Michigan was different. You had to adjust for them.
One note I made start of the second half was you guys come out to a pretty good start of the second half, and it seems like you catch the momentum right away. And there's a play towards the start of the second half where you get the ball down on the block and you make a really good kind of no-look bounce pass across the lane when you feel the double coming to AC Earl. And it was just a really good post-to-post pass that you don't see a lot nowadays because you don't have multiple posts in the game at one time. But it was just a really good, really good play.
Yeah. I actually did not play very well against Michigan. I played pretty well the couple nights before against Michigan State. I think I had 10-4, 10-6 or something. I had 1 point against Michigan. So you should have mentioned the free throw in the first half that I made. But
sorry, Wade.
Yeah. So it just was something where that was not my game. I had some better games as the season went on. But so thank you for bringing up a few of the positive plays. It just was something where, and we talked about this too, the Michigan guys did not want to play a lot of defense. They wanted to get out and go, and Weber was already coming out. Everybody in the world knew he was going to be the number one pick, and Juwan Howard was thinking about it. Jalen Rose was thinking about it. So they didn't want to play a lot of defense. So we talked about that too. Make them work, bringing the ball up the court. We thought they weren't great ball handlers, and then try to have a long possession. Maybe it's 20 seconds. Make them guard. And they didn't really want to do that. Mm-hmm. So anytime we got the ball down low, we thought they were going to double ace, kick it out for a three. I don't know why they doubled me, but I found ace, and he got a basket. Second half was great. Second half, everything just seemed to flow.
Yeah, I mean, Val Barnes gets it going.
Yeah.
That first, basically the whole
Those two stretches he had at Michigan State and Michigan were unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, against pros.
What's Val Barnes do with a focus on the 3-point line? Because he's taking like runners, he's doing 16-footers.
Yeah.
Like that was his game, and he's still putting up 27 in this game, 29 in the game
Val
before.
was a scorer, man. He went to Butler. He was from Wichita. He went to Butler Junior College for 1 year, and I remember when they were recruiting him, they were talking about how we got to get this kid from Butler. He's going to be a great scorer, and they sign him and they get him. He comes to campus, and we think we're getting some 6'7". Again, you really didn't know who kids were. And Val's maybe 6'1", and he's kind of chunky, but he could score. He could score, and he would be such a better player. He was a great player back then, but he would be an even better player now.
He'd be shooting 8 threes a game.
Yeah, it was so different, and he could handle it enough where he could get his own shot. That mid-range game was good, but that stretch where he had Michigan State and Michigan, I think he had over 50 between the two games, and it was really a special 2 games.
Well, what's amazing is the first 10 minutes of that second half, I don't know if I've ever seen Carver-Hawkeye quite like that.
Yeah.
All of the momentum is with Iowa. Val Barnes is rolling, and it feels like this could be a 15-point Iowa game at this point. And then it was just remarkable to me because I've always viewed Carver, and I grew up a Cyclone fan, so I have an affinity for Hilton. But I'd never seen Carver just kind of take control of the game. Like you had like I said, the fans were all over the court.
Yeah.
Guys are playing to the crowd. You're getting like Russ Millard coming in the game and getting a standing ovation, going out of the game, getting a standing ovation. And it was almost like Michigan was really on its heels and wasn't able to handle, the emotion of that home court.
Yeah. Not just a real side note, just a quick side note. So I was really fortunate to play at Iowa, and I was able to play in a lot of great venues, NCAA tournaments. We played at Carolina, played at Duke. Hilton Coliseum was the loudest arena I ever played in. I think part of that is that Iowa State rivalry. And
sure,
this is back when, there were Iowa kids on the Iowa State team.
Right.
A lot of Iowa kids on the Iowa team. It was a big, big deal. But Hilton was the loudest place I ever played in. I just think, just the way that game was where, January 19th, Chris is killed. And then the funeral is, I don't know what it was, 5 days later. And then, 3 days later, we go to Michigan State and have that unbelievable comeback. And now it's Sunday at noon, Super Bowl Sunday, first home game. And his family's there. And it just was something where, but you're right, Carver it's notorious for being kind of that. They used to call it that wine and cheese crowd, where they have maybe the more established, older donors sitting down below, and they don't get this. I think they were trying to do a better job of that as the years went on. But part of it is with the acoustics too, just the way that floor is built. That noise just keeps rising and rising and rising. Whereas at Hilton, it can't go very high; it's got to come back down. So, but there were games, even like Big Ten games, where mid-January, Northwestern come to town, and it would not be very loud at Carver. But Michigan was different. It was different.
And you
all the way around, fans, players, staff, everybody.
It was exciting. Like, it was exciting watching that game, and you guys grabbed control of that game. You're up 9 with under 12 minutes to go. And like we talked about, with the 45-second shot clock, a 9-point lead is a really big lead.
We thought we were in good shape.
Without people shooting the three.
Yep. Yeah.
45-second shot clock. You can go a long way with a 9-point lead, but then a huge momentum shifts in the game with 11:48 left. Russ Millard grabs a rebound. He's throwing the elbow like we always talk about. You chin the ball, you grab the rebound, you chin the ball, and he gets the Vosco kid from Michigan right in the nose and breaks his nose.
Yeah.
And there's like a 6-minute delay in the game. Well, James was his name.
James
Vosco is bleeding out on the ground.
Love blood, yeah.
And it totally changes the momentum in the game.
And it's funny too, because I mean, now there would be 4 uniform changes and surgical gloves and towels, because but back then they just grab a towel, wipe the blood off, wipe it off your uniform. But it was rough, and it was something where we just felt we were in really good shape, throughout the whole game, even down early. But you're right, we were up 9 or 10 at that 12-minute mark, and things turned a little bit. And again, talented team, so we knew we had to keep scoring. Teams, sometimes teams will sit back and not be as aggressive. I can remember Coach Davis saying too, "Hey, let's keep attacking. A lot of time left. Stay aggressive."
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that it was necessarily like you guys got flat. It was more like Michigan. They got their feet put to the fire a little bit, and then all of a sudden you had Jalen Rose just kind of took over the game for maybe.
They started calling it a lot closer too. I think whenever a foul like that happens, that really looks bad. It was not it was an inadvertent elbow, but I think they started calling it much closer.
Yeah,
and they were calling it closer to begin with. So now the fouls are mounting up really on both sides.
Yeah. Rose gets an and one. Weber gets an and one. Both of them are kind of ticky-tack fouls, but also Rose got it out in transition a little bit more at that point too. And all of a sudden you see why Jalen Rose is Jalen Rose. The first half, it's like you get this guy as a spot-up shooter, not a great shooter. You guys kept him in a bottle, but then all of a sudden he was able to get out in transition. He's matched up against like a 5'11" Kevin Smith. Jalen Rose is 6'8". Like you can just see the mismatch and why Jalen Rose was a 15-year pro and, why Kevin Smith was a good college player.
Right. It's just different. Yeah. And those guys were all different. Juwan Howard, again, that guy worked at his game a lot because he was, even as a freshman, he wasn't in great shape. I don't ever really remember him dunking a basketball in a game. He was super skilled, and really worked on, and really made himself took himself from a good player to a great player. But the way Michigan wanted to play was the same way we wanted to play. They wanted to run, not really guard anybody. We wanted to run, not really guard anybody. So for us, that was a good thing. We struggled with the teams like Wisconsin, who still plays this way, grind it out. They want to beat you 54-50. We wanted to get out and go. So the way they wanted to play actually worked in our favor.
Yeah, so you guys had been up 9 at that 12-minute mark, and then all of a sudden it gets back tied up on a Jimmy King dunk, 67-67, and that's coming right on the heels of, like I said, a Jalen Rose 3-point play, a Chris Webber 3-point play, and they had went on like a 15-4 run after that Vosco injury, and it's really a ball game with like 5 minutes to go, and then I thought, it could have gone either way. And there's a really big Iowa possession with maybe under 4 minutes to go, right around that 4-minute mark, where Iowa, you guys are running out the entire shot clock. Obviously, you guys want to get a really good shot, so you're working it around. You're not you're kind of passing up the open threes and looking to get it down to AC Earl. You get it down to AC Earl. 2 seconds left on the shot clock, and he turns over his right shoulder, fadeaway over Howard or Weber, and just knocks down a fadeaway jumper right at the buzzer of the shot clock to go up 2. And Carver-Hawkeye, the roof could have come out of that
place. Crowd just went crazy. I remember that play. I really do. And AC was so skilled, and he talk about a guy that worked at his game, because he came in as a freshman, was 7 feet tall, not in great shape, but great hands, great feet, and he turned himself into a pro, and he really worked to become a terrific basketball player. But again, he's playing against Chris Webber and Juwan Howard. It's a different time, but man, he was really good with that fadeaway. He wasn't going to go right at him and dunk on him, but as far as 12 to 15 feet, he was better than those guys. And that's what he did. He went to his strength, and he made some big shots at Michigan State and against Michigan.
Well, then I should also bring up that the press is really made a big difference in this game. And I think right after that AC Earl shot, you guys get a turnover on the press, and James Winters has a big steal, and he gets should have been a goaltending. Should have been an and one with goaltending, but they didn't call the goaltending at that time. But ends up going to the line and making one out of two to go up 3 with about 2:28 left in the game at that point. And you guys never lose the game or never lose control of the game from that point. Kenyon Murray has a big steal on an inbounds pass with about 2 minutes to go. And right as I'm watching this towards the end of the game, slowly you get a couple of steals. And they show the bench, and the bench is really into it. But right behind the bench is Jess Settles and Rafe LaFrance. And what a cool game for those guys to be on a recruiting visit to Iowa.
Yeah, Jess had already committed. So Jess was a senior that 93, and Rafe was in the class of 94. It is kind of funny. They were both there. I can remember in the locker room after the game, Rafe and his dad are in the locker room, and we all knew we knew who Jess was because he'd already committed, and everybody kind of, again, different time, but Rafe turned out was a star, 7'1", skilled, left-handed. Oh, by the way, but we still didn't really know who he was, and just this big kid hanging around, and it was kind of cool. It's funny how things might have worked out, whether it's Rafe LaFrance or Nick Collison, right, who you've had on the show. Nick talks about being a huge Hawkeye fan, and he loved Chris Street. I think that just shows even that, how wide of an era Chris, people knew Chris, whether you were Nick Collison, a young kid in, Fort Dodge or Iowa Falls at the time, probably. Whether I always say whether you were 10 years old or 80 years old, you still remember where you were that night. And some people will tell me that they didn't know till the next day. Unless you watched the news that night, some stations didn't even report it, and then it was in the papers the next morning, and people were driving to work, listening to it on the radio, and it just kind of goes to show that even 28 years later, how much of an impact he had on the state of Iowa.
Exactly. Great point, Wade. And, as that game wraps up, you guys ice the game at the free throw line, even though Bal Barnes misses a couple of free throws there at the end, and then Murray misses 2. You guys actually missed 6 in a row at the line, which was reminiscent of that Michigan State game the other way around. Yeah. But as soon as the game wraps up, you guys win 88-80. The whole team goes over and hugs the Street family. And it was really a cool impromptu moment. Like it didn't feel forced.
We took them the game ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, they were sitting front. So at the time, the parents would sit right across from our bench. So, where we sat, then right across the court was my folks and, all the other kids' folks and Chris's folks were right there. And so you saw him the whole game, mom, dad, and his sisters. And I can only imagine what they're thinking. They just buried their son 3 or 4 days ago and still trying to grasp what their life is going to be like now. And I don't know if I should ask Mike or Patty, Chris's folks. I don't know how many games they came to the rest of the year. I'm sure they came to a couple, but that was definitely by far the most memorable. But we took them the game ball, and then Mike came in the locker room and spoke to the team afterwards, and it's all kind of a blur. First off, because it was so long ago, and also just because it was just a crazy emotional time. I can remember so my folks had come down to the game, and we went out to eat afterwards. And again, Michigan, Iowa, you shower, you get cleaned up, do your press stuff. Super Bowl starting, so we go to this sports bar right down the street, and even after my one it was a very important point, but my one crucial point in the game, we walk in the sports bar and I get a standing ovation. It just was packed, and it just was something that everybody was trying to give support to the team and Chris's family, and it's just something for me personally too. So I started every game my sophomore year. And we were not very good that year, but at one time we were ranked 15th in the country. We just had some injuries and some great stuff, and then everything went to hell. And then I got hurt, and then Chris comes in, and I played a lot as a junior, but never started. And then my senior year, Chris is going to get all the minutes. I wasn't playing a lot. I was, trying to do what I could, but I would never have played anymore unless that happens to Chris. Mm-hmm. And it's something that, for me personally, I'm always kind of linked to that. And, you wouldn't be talking to me right now if this hadn't happened. I would have been and I had a good career. I think I started 50 games when I was at Iowa, but, my claim to fame I always joke about is my senior year in college, I finished second in the conference in free throw shooting. Okay. Again, very important, but, that translates that as long as I didn't have to dribble or jump or no one was guarding me, I was good. But other than that, so it just was something where, for me personally, I've always felt this bond and this connection with the streets and the street family, just because I started then every game after their son was killed in a car accident, and it's kind of sometimes it's a tough thing to handle and to talk about, because this game gets showed because it's on BTN a month ago because it's Chris's first game back after the car accident. And we talk about that Michigan State comeback because it's the first game after the accident and the season. And we ended up being a 4 seed in the tournament, and we had a good run. But it just was never going to be the same.
Yeah. Something was obviously missing, a big part
of course.
And I think my lasting impression, as I look back on all this stuff, and I read the Daily Iowan article that they wrote, and I've read a bunch of articles, around that time with both games and on the passing of Chris Street, was, I don't know if PR firms were involved or what, but the way the University of Iowa handled this, the way the Street family handled it, the way Tom Davis handled everything, there was just so much class in how everything was handled. And it's remarkable how quickly everything kind of came together with that. And for the Streets to be courtside, just a few days after the passing of their son, and the way they had statements in the Daily Iowan. They read a statement from the Street family during the broadcast of the Michigan game. Like, you guys presented them the game ball. They were in the locker room. It's remarkable how much grace and how much class kind of everybody involved had and handled this situation. And it's had this lasting legacy within the Iowa basketball program, with the University of Iowa, and within the state of Iowa. And I think a lot of that is not only the man that Chris Street was, but also the way his family has handled his legacy as well.
Yeah. And people forget too, there was a lawsuit afterwards, and this is a whole other story, but the snowplow driver was going way too fast, and Chris had this junky Chrysler LeBaron convertible, rear-wheel drive, ice, and the guy was trying to get home, and it was poor lighting and all these things. And so there was a lawsuit. The Street family filed a lawsuit against whoever it was.
Right.
And for a while there was some bad blood. And I can remember, people coming up to me, usually they were drunk and at a bar, and they were trying to get into it. And I would always say, the Streets just want to find out what happened to their son. And that, that's the only way they were really going to find out what happened to their son. So there were a couple years there where it was different, but that was gone really quickly. And it's just been something, Rick Brown, terrific writer, Fort Dodge, legacy family, wrote a terrific book a few years ago on the anniversary of Chris's, I think the 25th anniversary of Chris's death. And it's just something where for a while there, it was the year anniversary. And then it was 5 years and 10. And Andy Garman did an unbelievable piece on the 20th anniversary that aired on TV. And it just was so powerful. And then Rick's book, and And here we are 28 years later, and we're still talking about it. And I think it's just something where that's a testimony to, even though the 20 years Chris was alive, he did a lot, and his family has done a lot to kind of keep that memory. If you ever go down to the gym in Indianola, you got the Casey Blake wing, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But then there's that other little ancillary gym that has the huge mural of Chris. And it's just something where I think maybe we'll be back here at 40 and 50 years. And I'll give Coach McCaffrey a lot of credit, because he still talks about Chris. At the anniversary, I forget if it was the 20-year anniversary. I think it was. They played Wisconsin, and he had Chris's shirt there, and all these things. And he still allows the golf outing to be called Iowa basketball golf outing in memory of Chris Street. And there were previous coaches at Iowa basketball that did not do that. And Coach McCaffrey did an unbelievable job keeping his legacy and his name intertwined with Iowa basketball. Mm-hmm. And that's a really neat thing, and I'm really glad he's done that.
Yeah, the number 40 has never been worn since at Iowa basketball, and never will again. And it's pretty neat that they retired that immediately. Yeah, and it just shows what
I think kids wore it for a while. I thought that was really. I don't know if Fred ever wore it, but I know Morgan Wheat did. He was on that team that played with Chris in Virginia when Chris was a sophomore in high school, and
Hoiberg wore 40 his freshman year.
Yeah.
And then switched to 32 because Lauren Meyer wanted to wear 40 in honor of Chris Street. Yeah. And so that's when Lauren Meyer wore it.
Yeah, cool.
After that. And I mean, how often do you think, not so much about that incident, but just about Chris as a friend?
So that's kind of what I tell people too, is that a lot of people's memories and sadness ended when the season was over, and they still talk about him. But I miss now at 51 and a half, having our kids play together. Mm-hmm. Or, I have no doubt that Chris would have been a pro and played in the NBA. And I think I know he would have come back to Indianola. And I know Casey Blake just a little bit, but I think Chris would have done a lot kind of similar to what Casey has done so much for that community, was a pro, came back and coaches and financially has done so much for that community and that school. I know Chris would have done something very similar. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I miss, is just, like Paul Lusk, again, he's a Creighton and he's a dear, dear friend of mine, but I don't know if we would have remained this close without this bond of Chris's death. And so that's what I miss, is just watching our kids grow up and having a Budweiser with Big Mike Street, because that's all he drinks is the Red Tab. Don't try to get a light beer in him, but that's what I miss. Yeah.
Well, Wade, really appreciate you coming in and doing this, and hopefully we did the legacy of Chris Street some justice tonight. It's fun to relive some old games, especially ones that mean so much to the Iowa Hawkeye community, the college basketball world. And, those it was such a seminal game, that Michigan game on Super Bowl Sunday in '93. Not only, I think, Hawkeye fans remember it, but there's a reason they still play it on the Big Ten Network 28 years later, because it was just a great college basketball game.
It really was. And I think about, how that year would have gone if Chris hadn't gotten killed. And you talk about what ifs and this and that, and Chris was a great player. Two people talk about his heart and his tenacity. Well, he was also a great athlete, a great player, and there's no doubt in my mind. Here 28 years later, we'll still be talking about it 50 years from now, or 50 years after his death. So he was a terrific basketball player and even a better friend in person. Yeah, thanks,
Wade. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Moonlight Chronicles. For the rest of the Chronicles, head on over to our website at moonlightgrahamshow.com. Of course, I got to give a shout out to all of the athletic legends who sat down to help me record this series of the podcast. It has been so much fun to relive these great games, these great seasons, these great memories with the athletes, the coaches, and the fans who experience them. This has been a lot of fun. Before we wrap up, of course, I got to give a shout out to the rest of the Moonlight Graham Show team as well. Brian Sandvig does so much work to help bring these podcast episodes to life. Thank you, Brian. Of course, Brendan Gargano is our artistic director here at the Moonlight Graham Show. My brothers Andy and Neil Flattery do so much behind the scenes to make things happen. And I, of course, cannot forget the trusted co-host, Tommy Griffin. Thanks to everybody on the Moonlight Graham Show team, and especially thank you for listening and following along. Have a great day, guys.